and good evening to Maternity and Midwifery Hour, Season 6. I sound like some sort of documentary or something. Season 6, Session 2, and I'm delighted to be with you this evening for our second session. My name's Sue Macdonald. I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery Hour and these Maternity and Midwifery festivals. I've got it the wrong way round, but never mind. And it's my delight to be able to chair this evening's session, which is going to be really interesting to all of our audience. And we have lots of people, so I'd like to do a special welcome. We've got a whole lot of University of Derby student midwives who are doing something about infant feeding, so I know they're there. We've got some colleagues from Japan, from Spain, from Malaysia, Indonesia, New Zealand, Australia, Turkey and Nepal. So welcome everybody, and welcome to our colleagues in the UK also in the different countries. It's fantastic. I'm joined tonight by Caroline Buchan and Sharon Gilchrist, hope I pronounced that correctly, who are both from NHS Lothian near Edinburgh. My geography is hopeless, but that's helpful to know that. And we always start, as you all know, with getting our guests to do a little moment of the week. So could we start with Sharon, perhaps, your moment of the week?
Yep, so I'm keeping it Scottish here tonight. When I came home today from work, my youngest daughter told me that she has been picked to read out her Scots poem for Robert Burns Day at school. So there's much excitement in our household tonight because she's been practicing for the last week or so, and we've all been helping. So yeah, we're delighted that she's been selected to recite her poem for Burns Night. So that's exciting.
Wow. And is she going to have to come home and do the whole poem all over again?
Yes, probably.
Oh, how wonderful. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. How about Caroline? I think you might have an interesting moment of the week as well.
Yes, mine isn't Scottish, I'm afraid. It's I've been asked to work as a supporting actor on the new Batgirl movie that's getting filmed in Glasgow. So that's exciting.
Oh, it is exciting. Gosh, you'll get very close to the action.
Well, hopefully.
Oh, fantastic. Well, those are two great moments of the week. So thank you for sharing those. We're going to give our guests a little tiny rest before we get them to speak. And they'll be talking about delivering early breastfeeding support. So, and all about their project. Really interesting. So I'll get to that in a minute. I just need to say a few words. You'll know that this actual hour was born from the COVID pandemic as a way of making sure that we as midwives and student midwives could meet in some way and connect, and also get some information in sort of bite-sized bits rather than a big conference. And so we're carrying on with this, which is why we're on series 6, and it's being managed by Matflix. So thank you to them for looking after all of the recordings, because for those of you who might be listening for the first time or watching for the first time, everything is recorded, so you can't miss anything. Or if you miss something, or maybe Sharon this evening says something, oh, I must go and see, what did she say? I can't quite get it. You can actually go back to the recording and look at it again. And so it really helps you learn even better. Fantastic if you're doing a project or an assignment or a dissertation, or if you have to do your revalidation, as midwives have to do every 3 years. Great place to get information. So now I must turn off my sounds, which I didn't do. I apologize. To go there, that's it. And also, I also need to say the practicing midwife who are our partners, I want to say a big thank you to them as well, and just point you towards the practicing midwife, because they've got some special offers at the moment. And that's, again, a fantastic resource for us midwives. I think we are so lucky to have all these resources in a very manageable way, in a very attractive way. We're very fortunate, so I'm very happy about that. I just want to also say a big thank you to everybody who's working in the service at the moment, in the maternity services particularly, but also in the NHS, because this last few weeks has been a huge challenge. People are really tired. People are really short-staffed at the moment because obviously there's quite a few people who are unwell. So people are going, as ever in the NHS, above and beyond, as always, with very little thanks. So we want to say a big thanks and big gratitude to you. And look after yourselves. Now, on that point, I'm going to whip out my Happiness January calendar, which that helps me remember that you will have access to a whole load of resources, which I've got a whole list of them. And this happiness calendar, and those of you who watch this on a regular basis know that I'm a bit obsessed about this because it helps us focus. And each day on this little calendar, you have a different thing to do. Now, today, Wednesday the 19th, it says, focus on what's good, even if today feels tough. I think that's a very good thing to think about. So just think about teeny weeny things. And I'm looking already at tomorrow's, which says, go to bed in good time and allow yourself to recharge. So I'm looking ahead at that. That sounds good. So if you haven't had a look at this, do have a look at it because it can be really helpful when you're feeling stressed. Okay, and I'm going on to the news. We had a 17th of January was a debate in Parliament on midwives and midwifery. There is a link on the Maternity and Midwifery Forum page, and there is going to be a blog all about it. So do go and have a look at that because it really comes alive. And I know when you look at the chamber, the Parliament chamber, often it looks a little bit empty, but there were people there and they were speaking about midwifery, maternity and women and babies. And it's really important we know what people are saying about us. And it's important at this point to say it's useful to get a bit political. So get to know your MP and get in contact with them if they're doing things, you want to raise our image in the public. Always good to do. Okay, it's also this week is 17th to the 23rd is Cervical Cancer Prevention Week. And there's a fantastic blog available on the Maternity and Midwifery Forum page. So do have a look at that. We know how important it is to do all the prevention work. So get into that. It's still, and I can't even say this, Veganuary month. So try and eat your vegetables a bit more this month. Keep healthy. And it's also, this is an interesting one for those of you on computers now, it's National Clean Up Your Computer Month. So not just housekeeping your cupboards and things, but also housekeeping your computer. Good thing to be thinking about. Okay, and there's also a new publication from the Association for Improvements in Maternity Care, AIMS, Giving Birth to Your Baby, which has just been published. Worthy of having a look at that. And there's lots of news about COVID lockdown, and we know that also that there's restrictions being reduced, but there's also on that list of resources some research that's just been available. I found it on Twitter with this nice little table. I do like colourful things, and this is all about keeping yourself and your loved ones safe, and what activity is the safest and when you need to wear your mask and do your social distancing. And that's on the list. So have a look at it, all evidence-based. Quite a heavy bit of research, but the tables are very clear, give lots of evidence. So have a look at that. Okay, I'm going to now move on to our main meat of the evening. And I'm really so pleased to have Caroline and Sharon with us this evening. We're looking very specially at strategies to help women and families breastfeed their babies. And we've got these two speakers to share their experience of it. It's a very innovative project in Lothian, and it's called the Delivering Early Breastfeeding Support, or the Debs team. I love this, the Debs, because when you think of Debs, you think of very elegant people. And here we have two very elegant people to be with us. So we've got Sharon and Caroline. So I'm just going to do that little introduction so you know who they are. Both CVs are on the website, so you can learn more about Sharon and Caroline. They're going to share what they do very clearly with you this evening anyway. Now, Sharon became a midwife in 2008, following a bit of a career change. She's passionate about supporting women on their feeding journey and joined the NHS infant feeding team in 2016. She's been involved in UNICEF BFI work, partnership work, and developing peer support for breastfeeding. And if you don't know about that, that's a very interesting area to look at also. She's been working the Debs project since it began in September 2019, and she's just completed the UNICEF Baby Friendly Initiative Qualification Framework at practitioner level. And Caroline Buchan has been a midwife since 1999 and has worked in various NHS trusts over that time. She's always had an interest in supporting breastfeeding, but became more aware of the challenges women face following her personal experience of breastfeeding her second child. So Caroline is one of 2 midwives who've implemented the Debs model of care since the project began in September 2019. And I'm delighted to welcome Sharon and Caroline to join us, to speak now. The screen is now yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue, for inviting us along. We're delighted to come and share with you this evening. I'm just going to share my screen so everybody can see. Okay, great. So yeah, thanks very much for inviting us along, and we're just going to share with you the project that we've been working on. So NHS Lothian, the trust that we work for, or the board that we work for, is one of the 14 health boards across Scotland. And we were successful in early 2019 in securing funding from the Scottish Government. So the Scottish Government had offered funding to organisations that wanted to support breastfeeding. So these projects had to align with the Scottish Government's stretch aim, which is, it's quite long-winded, but I'm going to go for it. So the stretch aim from the Scottish Government is to reduce the drop-off in breastfeeding at the 6 to 8 week check by 10% by 2025. So that's one of their aims in relation to breastfeeding. So we submitted applications for 2 projects, and we were successful in securing funding for both of those. The first project was for antenatal hand expressing, and a colleague worked on that one. And the second project that we got funding for is the one that we're going to talk about this evening, and as Sue kindly introduced, it's the Delivering Early Breastfeeding Support, Debs for short, project, and that was born in September 2019. So the idea in this project is to have a multi-skilled team who cut across maternity and health visiting services to mobilise support for breastfeeding, early support for breastfeeding. Now, unfortunately, due to issues with recruitment, the multi-skilled team is Caroline and I, basically. They were unsuccessful in recruiting to the other vacancies that we had, which would have been nursery nurses and maternity care assistants. So Caroline and I are the team as it is. So basically we started in 2019, and the decision was made to choose a particular area within NHS Lothian. So NHS Lothian covers Edinburgh City and 3 areas that outlie the city. West Lothian lies to the west, as the name suggests. And it was chosen as the area for this project because historically West Lothian has had quite a high drop-off rate from breastfeeding. So it was decided that this would be the location for our project. And the aim of our particular project was to reduce the drop-off of breastfeeding by 2% by the health visitor's visit, which is normally sort of between day 10 and 15. So that was the aim that we set ourselves. And we started the project in one area of West Lothian called Bathgate, which is a town, and that has 3 GP surgeries. So that's where we started the project. And we've now expanded, and we're covering 7 GP surgeries, which cover 3 different areas in West Lothian. So Caroline and I are doing that at the moment. We can't probably go any further because we've probably reached the limit, but we would hope if it's to be extended that we could recruit some more staff to support that. But that's where we are at the moment. So all these projects, the government wanted them to have quality improvement focus. So using quality improvement methodology to implement change, and then the idea is that you evaluate the change as you go along, and you continue to make small changes and evaluate continuously to reach your aim or your target. So that's what we did. We took some information from our Scottish infant feeding survey that's published, and along with some data from families. We met with families across Lothian and spoke to them about their breastfeeding journeys, and spoke to mums about why they had stopped breastfeeding before they wanted to. And we also spoke to maternity staff and health visiting staff as well, actually. And it gave us a real wealth of information and helped us to identify a starting point for the project. So we decided that the first thing that we would offer would be a one-to-one antenatal conversation with women and their partners if they chose to attend. So that is normally offered to women around 36 weeks gestation, and it's just a conversation about breastfeeding. We're not talking about any other part of parent education. We're focusing on breastfeeding at that conversation. And the aim of that conversation is really to build women's confidence and hopefully build their knowledge about breastfeeding. We very much focus on the early hours and the early days after birth at the antenatal conversation. We have an emphasis on effective positioning and attachment. We talk about how to know if baby's getting enough, and responsive parenting really is the focus for that conversation. It normally takes about an hour, but obviously there's a variation, but on average, it's been about an hour that we spend having that conversation. Obviously, that's being done virtually at the moment through a video call because we're not meeting women face to face. So that's what we're doing for the antenatal conversation. We quite often like to talk about breastfeeding as being a new skill, that it's something that you're learning, that obviously if it's a first baby that they've never done before. And I'll often liken it to learning to ride a bike. You know, you have to practice, it takes time, and you have support there, like the stabilizers on a bike. We think of our project as being a little bit like that for breastfeeding. So that's kind of our antenatal conversation and how we talk about it. And I'm just going to show you here, this is some of the tools, if you like, our little toolkit that we have. And it's some of the things that we use really as visual aids to assist with the conversation. And we do get some really good feedback that helps, you know, the families to remember the things that we've talked about, that there's a visual clue there to help them. So these are here to help us talk about the microbiome. We talk about baby wearing, hormones that are involved with breastfeeding, tummy size, positioning and attachment. And we also share with women links and clips from our Scottish Government Parent Club website. We also share information and links to the UNICEF Baby Friendly Initiative website and global health media links, which come in different languages, which we find really useful as well. Okay, so I'm just going to play a little audio now, and this is really just to share with you some of the feedback we've had from families about the antenatal conversation.
The fact that your experience and knowledge in breastfeeding has today confirmed that my thinking is correct. You have increased my confidence in my ability to breastfeed.
Thanks a lot. It was a very productive and positive call, I must say. You explained things extremely well. I'm really happy with all the information you gave me. My mindset to breastfeed is even more strong now. Can't wait for baby to come so I can start my feeding journey.
Thank you again for your call. It was really good to talk things through from the last experience, and I feel a bit more prepared for the second time round.
So that's just a little bit of the feedback from families when we've asked them about the antenatal conversation, how it made them feel and what they found helpful from it. So we started this and started to look at the outcomes, the breastfeeding outcomes from the families that were offered the antenatal conversation. And we noticed that it was actually improving outcomes for breastfeeding, for continued breastfeeding, as people were as women were discharged from the hospital. So that was good, and we felt that at least it was making some improvement. However, that wasn't a sustained improvement. And by the time we were reaching, or babies were reaching 6 to 8 weeks, we were seeing some improvement, but not as much as we would have liked. So that started us to think, what's going to be our next change on this quality improvement journey? What would be the next step? What can we add to our antenatal conversation that will support continued breastfeeding? And we had a plan in place, and then unfortunately COVID hit, and that put a bit of the brakes on, shall we say. So Caroline and I were both redeployed at that point back into the maternity unit, and that obviously put the project on hold at that point. We came back in the end of May 2020 and restarted the project. So at that point, we were very aware women were receiving no parent education, or families, the parents, I should say, sorry, were receiving no formal antenatal education from NHS Lothian at that time. That had been stopped, and our breastfeeding support groups and drop-in groups were all closed as well. So we were acutely aware that actually the support for breastfeeding had been greatly reduced because of COVID. We met with our infant feeding lead, our public health lead, and our lead from the programme, the Scottish Government project lead, who was supporting our project. And we all agreed that actually, rather than taking another small step and implementing a small change, we should implement the other 2 changes that we had earmarked. So at that point, we decided that that's how we would move the project forward, which meant that we would be offering an antenatal conversation, along with a postnatal ward visit following the birth, and then postnatal support by telephone to the families until the baby is 28 days old. And the idea of those additions of the postnatal support was to see if we could improve the continued breastfeeding rates. We were building on that conversation that we'd had antenatally with women. We were revisiting some of the topics from that conversation when we visited them in the ward. We were hoping to build their confidence and knowledge even more. And we also, at the ward visit, we will talk about what are the next things that might happen for you when you take your baby home. So looking at the next 24 to 48 hours and really thinking about what do women need to know at this point that will prepare them for the next couple of days in relation to breastfeeding. And again, the ward visit on average takes about an hour with each family. So that was the next stage. And I would just like to share with you, again, this is just some feedback from families. I'll just check my volumes. Okay. I think it's just going to play. So this is the feedback from the families about the ward visit.
I really find the ward visit very relevant and important to me.
You were the only person on the postnatal ward that spent time getting baby on the breast. Some midwives on the ward were helpful, others not so helpful.
I can't believe how much more informed we are this time round. We weren't told half the things you talked about today with my first baby.
Okay, so we've gone to see women, we've visited them in the ward, and we've given them some support, and then they take their baby home. And so the day following their discharge, we will start to offer telephone support or video calls or text messages, and sometimes a combination of all of those. And that's a 6-day service that we offer, and that continues or can continue until the baby is 28 days old. So this is a proactive service. So we actively phone women. We don't just give them a phone number and say, if you're having any issues, give us a call. We will phone them the day after discharge, and then at that chat, we'll talk about, would you like a call tomorrow? Would you like a call the next day? And we schedule in the next call. This sort of type of proactive call was based on the FEST study, which was carried out by Pat Hoddinott and colleagues in 2012. And they were looking at reactive versus proactive telephone support for breastfeeding in the postnatal period. So we based it on that, and we decided that the proactive support would be the one that would work the best for women and their families. So the next slide is just really to give you a little bit of insight into how what that support looks like. So when we look at all our women together, this is giving us a bit of insight into how much support is needed and what days are is the support needed more. So we've got the age of the baby running along the bottom here, and the duration of calls in minutes. So you can see here that day 4, there's a real, that's the day where there's the biggest demand, if you like, and the input is the support that we give is much bigger on day 4. And then it gradually starts to decrease. And then we have another slight increase on day 12, and then again on day 17. And in the next slide, this is looking at women individually. So we've got individual women running along the slide at the bottom. And on our y-axis up the side, we're looking at postnatal input in hours. So this is logging all the calls that we do and the time spent on those calls. You can see there is a couple of women that have required quite a significant amount of support, up to 6 hours and just beyond 6 hours. But the majority require a lot less than that. But I hope that these slides can help you to see that actually any service that's offering additional support for breastfeeding has to be flexible, and it has to be adaptable to differing needs, because every woman and every family will need something different. They don't all fit into the same peg, if you like, the same hole. So we try and be flexible and adaptable in this way to meet the needs of the women that require the service. So I'm just going to show one more little audio here, and this is just a little bit of feedback. Just check my volume's okay. This is just feedback about that third part of the service, so the telephone or the calls and text support that we offer.
The support you are offering is amazing. You are doing a fantastic thing here.
I have used the information received from Debs to help my sister-in-law with her breastfeeding. I couldn't have done this without this project.
I have sent on to friends and family the links and information you sent me. Knowing you're there to ask has given me confidence to continue. The biological nurturing links you sent are great and have really helped during the night when baby is being fussy at the breast.
Honestly, thank you so much for all your help you gave me yesterday, as I honestly think I would have stopped if I hadn't spoken to you. Just even the simple hints and tips helped massively. I feel like a different person today. Thank you so much.
And I'm just going to hand over now to Caroline, who's going to share some of our actual outcomes and some of the data that we've collected.
That last one always makes me feel really emotional. We were saying today, I was like, oh, hope I don't get too emotional when I hear that one. It doesn't really, I don't know why it does. Anyway, sorry. The project is open to everybody that books in the antenatal period in the areas that we're working in. So around 30% of the women in these areas are supported by the project. They're they consent basically to be part of the project. And to date, when we look at all the figures, 41% of the families that are recruited that have had babies before, and of those, 83% have had previous breastfeeding experiences. So it just shows that it's not just mums, that the first time mums that are looking for support with breastfeeding. And it just, it highlights basically that, having breastfed before doesn't mean that you're an expert at it, and it always helps to have support. Sometimes when we're doing the antenatal conversations, we're saying that it takes an hour roughly to do these antenatal conversations, but sometimes we're actually spending some time at just talking about previous breastfeeding experiences and supporting mums about their feelings that they've got from the last experience, and sort of just talking about what to do this time round sort of thing. So it's not just about the antenatal conversation that we have, it's a lot of the time it is talking about what's happened, what's gone before. In our project as well, we also have a small supply of electric pumps, and we've also noticed about a quarter of the women in our project have required the use of them. And we can get them to the women quite quickly, and we can support them with a feeding plan when they're using them as well. So that all helps with sort of the support and breastfeeding. So I'd like to show you some of our results so far. So if you look at it, when you compare our outcomes to those of Scotland, NHS Lothian as a board, and then looking at West Lothian as a locality, the higher percentage of Debs babies continue to breastfeed at the first health visitor visit and at the 6 to 8 week check. So it shows that providing additional antenatal education along with the additional support postnatally has a positive impact on continuing to breastfeed. This slide is thinking about basically our project aim was to reduce the drop-off by 2% in a chosen area. So again, if you look at one area in West Lothian and then compare all those whose first feed was breastfeeding, you see that the drop-off at the first health visitor visit in Bathgate to the year prior to Debs starting is 47%. And then if you look at 2020, some of these women in that area have had the Debs support, the Debs service, and you can see that the drop-off has been reduced to 37%. And it's likewise, it's the same with the 6 to 8 week check. The drop-off reduced from 60% in 2019 to 46% in 2020. So all of that, when put together, it equates to a 22% improvement at both the health visitor visit and the 6 to 8 week check. There are lots of bits of information that we've been keeping in this project. One of them is weight loss in the project. So we've been at 5 to 6 days, the babies are all weighed by the community midwives, and we know that the mums really focus on that weight as evidence that the babies are getting enough, whatever it is, they focus on that weight loss. So as you can see through this chart, the majority of the babies are below 10% weight loss. The few that actually have had larger weight losses, we found that there have been sort of reasons for these, like PPH, things like that. Basically, we hope that having the additional support, we can sort of reduce the number of babies that are being readmitted to hospital for weight loss admissions, and hopefully increasing the mum's confidence in their breastfeeding, because like I said, mums do focus on this to know that their babies are getting enough. And currently the average weight loss in our project, it works out, it's calculated out at 4.7% as a weight loss in comparison to your average breastfeeding weight loss. It's slightly lower. So we're always trying to ensure that that women, families have access to a variety of support. And some women, prefer to talk on the phone, others prefer to read something, others prefer to go online, same as the rest of us. And as part of this, we started promoting the Breastfeeding Network helpline, and they've also shared with us their information that from October 2020 to November 2021, they've noticed a double in the amount of calls that they've had from our locality, from our postcode area. It could maybe partly due to the promotion of the service. Women have also shared with us that they've gone on to support other women with breastfeeding just with the information that we've given them. In the postnatal ward, we've had women talking about, the tummy sizes and talking to other mums and explaining that the size of your baby's tummy in comparison to how much your baby's needing. And we've had other people supporting family members who've just started their breastfeeding journeys, and all of that we're hoping contributes to building a breastfeeding community from the grassroots. We're currently working with NHS Lothian Pure supporters. They are helping to provide the postnatal calls as well. And we've made links with the National Childbirth Trust, who are currently working in West Lothian for the first time. They're running a breastfeeding support group, and they're offering one-to-one support as well. So all in all, it's going in the right direction. We're getting the support out, and we hope that by being part of the project, it's given value to women's feelings and experiences of early motherhood and breastfeeding. And we're also hoping that it's encouraging the partners to think about their role early parenthood. And we hope that it supports women to achieve their personal breastfeeding goals, and also improving breastfeeding rates in our board and improving outcomes for babies and families. It's just another slide. Some feedback.
My knowledge in breastfeeding was much better than my friends who didn't take part in the project, and it gave me confidence that everything I was doing was right and that my baby was and still is getting enough.
This is an amazing service with great support. Really helped my anxiety so much. Thank you.
The microbiome scientific part of the antenatal conversation was good. I really liked that part. It's not something that is normally discussed.
There should be a midwife who only does breastfeeding. It deserves to be a job in itself. When the community midwife visits, she has so many other things to talk about. On the days she did not visit, I would not have bothered her to ask the questions I had about breastfeeding.
Thank you for listening.
That's great. Thank you very much. I know we've had a couple of questions in, and I wanted to be a sneaky question. I couldn't work out your tool bag. It looked as though you had an extension lead with little different plugs in, and I want to know what that is. You've stimulated my interest in that.
So we've used that in Lothian in our staff training for a number of years to talk about hormones. So we use it to talk about to think about the prolactin receptor sites and how after birth there are things that you can do to help to switch them on. So a bit like putting the plug in. So things like skin to skin and early feeds or hand expressing if the baby's sleepy. And each time we talk about one of these things, we put a plug in to say that's you now switched on the receptor sites, and then they will make milk for the baby.
I love it.
A visual.
I love it. Thank you very much. Okay, I've got a question from Charlotte. And for those of you watching, you want a question, now's your chance. We've got about 15 minutes for questions. So just pop them in the question box. The reason I'm looking away, obviously for people who know the show, I have another screen where the questions come in because I have to have my people in front of me, all of us together. So Charlotte says, she's obviously, what has been the barrier to recruiting into the roles you had available? Because you said you've become you were going to be a team of maybe 4 or 5, and you're a small and beautifully put together team of 2. But what do you think were the barriers? And do you think in the future you'd be able to get people interested?
Yeah, I think I came on board first, and so there was a member of staff who would have come on to the team as a maternity care assistant, but then she was accepted into nursing, so she left to pursue that, which is fantastic. And there just has been a lack of interest in the nursery nurse or the maternity care assistant role. I'm not really sure why. Perhaps it's because it was temporary posts. It is a project, so it's only a temporary contract. And maybe, people don't want to leave permanent posts for temporary. Also, the staff that work in the hospital, they'll get shift allowance pay, and we don't get things like that. So these possibly are things that create barriers that I'm aware of, but I don't, other than that, I'm not very sure.
Okay.
It is a shame, but yeah.
But the project finishes in March anyway. Is it going to continue, do you think, or are we keeping our fingers crossed for it?
We've got funding until June, and that's the best we know. So.
Okay, we'll definitely have to keep our fingers crossed then.
Yeah. Please.
Okay. Thank you for that question that got us going, Charlotte. Thank you very much. Now we have Nicola Clark. Thank you, Nicola. She says, do you think new mothers were badly affected during COVID restrictions and missed the in-person support that was available prior to 2020?
Caroline, do you want to answer?
Yeah, they didn't have in our area. They didn't have the antenatal. They didn't have the antenatal education at all. Initially, it was just online education that they had, and it was very basic. So yes, they did, and I know that some of the midwives in the hospital that we work in were talking about parents coming in and they weren't actually even sure how to hold babies. They didn't know any of the basics for looking after a baby, let alone breastfeeding. So yeah, I would say they definitely missed out, and they also didn't have the meeting other mums that were in the same situation. They didn't have any of that. So yeah,
which is a huge part of it. I mean, presumably now, and I would say generally, we've all got a lot better at doing online activities. Are you able to get a group together online to talk and have the same sort of experience as they would face to face? Has that been something you've done, or have you been focusing on the one-to-one?
For us, when we were doing feedback for the antenatal conversations, the majority of mums actually said they would prefer one-to-one so that they could ask questions. They said maybe small groups. They didn't want to do large groups. One-to-one was the preferred choice. And then postnatally in our areas, they've got the community midwives have been setting up WhatsApp groups for the ladies of each month. So they do have a way of sort of communicating with the other ladies in their area. We've not looked at, we've talked about it quite a bit actually, most weeks, but it's not something that's part of our project at this point in time. So
I mean, I suppose it's from a woman's point of view, it's a bit of a treat to have that focused attention on purely you and how special you are, because I think sometimes that's what you can kind of lose in sometimes the group dynamics, I guess. So that's,
I mean, it's definitely a luxury, and it's something that if this type of project was to be scaled up, you probably couldn't maintain that. You know, you would have to look at a different way, because it's, you know, how can you match one person with one midwife to do an hour for every lady? That's very, it's not cost effective, I guess, but perhaps small groups would be a way to do that. But yeah, that personal thing, I think, is what a lot of women benefit, and particularly, as Caroline said, if they've had a traumatic or a negative experience the first time, that conversation allows them time to explore that and talk about their feelings around that, and, you know, work through that a little bit, which I think is quite important before they take part in their next breastfeeding journey, to sort of, you know, to deal with it a little bit.
It feels like a very good investment to me.
Yeah, we would agree.
Of course.
Yeah,
of course. Now I'm going to move on to, so thank you, Nicola, for that question. Good question. We have Joanne Leslie. Hi, Joanne. And she says, have you noticed any impact on rates of postnatal depression with this service?
No, it's not something that we've measured, is it? But
again, it's something that we have talked about, but it's not something that we've been able to measure.
Yes, I mean, that's an interesting question, Joanna, because I think that, and it's almost goes back to what we were just saying about having that focused attention on that important person who's often trying to juggle everything else. I mean, we all know what women are like when they've had babies. They're suddenly trying to look after the baby, look after the house, be superwoman, and it's not really surprising women do get depressed, really. So that might be another piece of work coming, Jan, or it could be a project for you, Jan. There we are.
Next.
And Sep, hi Sep, says, how many months, years is a healthy time to breastfeed newborns? Well, of course, a newborn is only a period of time, but I wonder if you're asking about baby to children, to bigger infants. Did you want to answer that one, Sharon? Or
well, certainly when women ask us that, we would sort of quote the World Health Organization, which recommends to 2 years and beyond. But I know in this country that's definitely not the norm, but that's what we would recommend and suggest to women.
And that's a good point for me to flash. This is available from the WHO. I only found out about these today, and I'm very delighted with them. This is a little infographic, and it's actually entitled "Many Women Do Not Breastfeed for as Long as They Would Like." And that might be because they're having problems, they're trying to balance everything else, but it might be because the sort of social attitudes about breastfeeding babies longer than when they're little babies. But again, this is on your resources list, so you can have a look at some of the resources from the World Health Organization. They're really very good, and they might be useful to you as midwives or student midwives. So thank you for that. So we're saying the 2 years, and there is a lot of information on WHO on that, so that's a good place for homework. And Kezia Kropidlowska, she says, are you thinking to recruit from BFN too, as it happens in London, for example? I'm BFN supporter, but even as a helper, I volunteered with local infant feeding teams.
Sharon, you talk.
Yeah, I think we again, it's something that we discuss a lot, because we have NHS volunteers who are peer supporters, and we're very aware that there are other organisations, and certainly in Scotland, some of those organisations also were fortunate to receive funding from the government that I mentioned at the beginning. So they've been running projects alongside in relation to breastfeeding. And we're very keen that we should all dovetail and work together. So that, we're delighted that we've sort of made links with NCT in West Lothian, because it's great to then have a service that you can refer women on to. When your support stops, where else can they go? They want somewhere else. So we're delighted with that. It's a really difficult one, because obviously having volunteers that work for NHS Lothian, there's time and money and effort to recruit and to support them. And for Caroline and I, we don't have an awful lot of time personally to do that. So, in a way, is it almost better to outsource these support to these organisations that do it so well? But we're very passionate about our breastfeeding supporters as well. We want to, we want to keep them, because
look after them.
Yeah, they get something out of it as well, don't they? And some of them are now student midwives, and that's fantastic. So it's about building capacity and building community, I think. But yeah, at the moment we've not got a link with BFN in West Lothian, but we certainly do in Edinburgh. So our board does, but not particular to West Lothian at the moment.
Fantastic, thank you for that. Okay, I've got a question from Rebecca. She says, do you have information on parents that give birth early that has not managed to get their antenatal conversations, and have you followed any of these women?
The project is we at 28 weeks we'll ask mums at their antenatal appointment if they are wishing to be part of the project, and we then book the antenatal conversation in between 34 to 36 weeks. So the project was to support women with term babies. So we haven't been able to do that because the project was from 37 weeks onwards. No, we haven't. We would like to do it as well, but
this sounds like another project. But it's often with women who go into labour early, they often have to get everything truncated and kind of condensed, don't they? Like meeting the midwife in the labour ward. So it often, and remember, you know, the Sharon and Carolyn are looking at this project, and this is their baby, as it were, and the feeding. But of course, it is part of our role as midwives and student midwives to be supporting and helping women, whatever their birth journey, towards infant feeding. So thank you. That was a good question, though. And then we have Rojin Maguire. What do you find to be the most frequent reason women stopped breastfeeding? Were the reasons given surprising or in line with the research? I think that might be one for Caroline, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I would say in line with research, to be honest with you. The majority in the early days when we were infant feeding survey will sort of show that it's the first couple of weeks, the main reasons were because it hurt or because they were worried that the babies weren't getting enough. And that, I would say, is pretty much accurate in our project. The mums that are stopping or going to mixed feeding, you know, they're worried that the babies aren't getting enough, or they've got problems with pain when they're feeding.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, well, that's good. It's in line with research, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. And Heather Kerr, hi Heather, says, really fantastic to see the encouraging statistics. Do you think this type of input will follow suit to other health boards? I think we'd like it to.
Yeah, definitely. So as part of this being funded by Scottish Government, the idea is that so there's projects all across Scotland at the moment, actually, or some of them are finished now. But the idea was that we would all come back together and share our findings. And of course, COVID has made that a little bit difficult, and it was meant to happen at the end of last year and has been put on hold. So the plan now is in March this year, all the projects will share their findings. And the hope is that the government then, you know, I don't know, pick the ones that have the best results and look at how these things can be spread more widely. It has to be funded, you know, there has to be a commitment somewhere. I don't know if that's to come from the government or the health boards, but yeah, we would love to certainly look at how we can scope this out, even just for, you know, initially across Lothian and looking at other areas that have high drop-offs. And if we then brought the project to those areas, can we have the same impact? So that would be probably our next step locally, but equally it's on the radar for the whole of Scotland to look at because of the stretch aim they have for 2025.
I mean, the benefit is for this sort of presentation is that you could actually, as midwives, the audience here I'm talking to really could take parts of the project, i.e. this sort of idea of a really concentrated time when you can talk infant feeding to the mother. We give so much information to women, but there is a place for that. So this is a sort of way of thinking about it. Now, I've got Joe D'Agustin. Hi, Joe. Says, great presentation. Yes, she's right. Thank you. And great results. How lucky are the service users in your area? Thank you. Wonderful to see how your data you're collecting and how you are supporting an understanding of physiology amongst mums. Fantastic. I've one concern. Is it possible to compare this project with one in which such breastfeeding support is embedded in a continuity of care model of care, given that's the model that's, well, it's going UK wide, isn't it? The continuity model. We've all got different country strategies with that same kind of philosophy underpinning. What do you think? Is that a Sharon question?
You can have that one, Sharon.
So we are currently we work in 3 areas, and one of our areas has become a Best Start area. So the Best Start is the model that we're rolling out in Scotland for that continuity of care. So we're working alongside those Best Start midwives, with the idea being that, you know, at the moment we're giving that one-to-one antenatal conversation. But I think the hope is that it would be looking at how can that conversation be taken over by that Best Start midwife, and can she then deliver, you know, a similar model to us with the capacity that they have. So that's something that we've started doing in one of our areas. So yeah, watch this space, I guess. I think at the moment, the sort of initial feedback from the midwives is they didn't see how they could give that whole hour antenatally to each woman, but they are very new in that model, so it's going to maybe take them a couple of months just to find their own feet in this new way of working, and then we can maybe revisit again how they would be able to fit that antenatal that really good antenatal conversation into their care package.
Fabulous.
And they have taken into consideration the postnatal sort of evidence that we gave them for the telephone support, and started to the mums that were breastfeeding in the project, not in the project, sorry, the mums that were breastfeeding in that area, and actually phoning them a little bit more frequently than what they had been doing before, because we could tell them that on these days, this is when the mums are sort of needing a little bit more support.
Oh yeah, from the little block pictures that you had. Yeah, absolutely. Really good. Thank you very much. That's fantastically answered. Lovely. Okay, we've got Nora Vallejo. Not sure if my pronunciation sounds Spanish. Hi, Nora. She says, are postnatal workloads for midwives negatively impacting breastfeeding support, or is it that midwives are losing confidence in supporting women? That's a very good question, Nora. Very good question. And I'm not sure what the answer is, actually. And I'm not sure if it would be fair to make Sharon or Caroline answer that one. Do you have any views on that? It's
personally, on the surface, I think it's time. I don't think it's that that midwives don't have the skills, because you know, I haven't particularly done a huge amount of more infant feeding training than any other midwife, but I think it's time.
You got the focus.
It's my personal opinion, but if there's any community midwives out there that beg to differ, that's, you know, but from my perspective, it's
well, if they beg to differ, they're going to have to get a move on, because we're running on time here. Okay, and someone is Monique Rabowski, lactation consultant Shell Banks, has written a book about formula feeding called Why Formula Feeding Matters. She found it important to write this book as all information about formula comes from formula companies. Oh, it launches tomorrow and should be a good read. I don't know this person, but so that's just some information for our audience there. And then we have Sharon Goen says, do you find there are certain types of resources that may help mums who may be struggling to maintain breastfeeding more than others? For example, leaflets, one-to-one group meetings. Go on, Caroline.
I was going to say, I really find the global health media links really, really useful for mums. I think that's my go-to when, like, if I've got a mum that I'm speaking to that's really struggling, because they can visually see the position and attachment. They can, and it's in lots of different languages as well. So it's got everything in it. If they've got, you know, position and attachment, sore breasts, sore nipples, if they want to increase their milk supply, it's got information about if you've got small babies that you're feeding. It's got so much information in there that pretty much everything's in there.
So that's the go-to. That's fantastic.
That's my go-to.
Sounds like a good go-to to me.
Yeah.
And Nicola Clark says, our words create worlds. To reduce the possible guilt concept with giving up, could we suggest our terminology and suggest mothers have breastfeeding cross days, weeks, and then change their method of feeding, not give up? Yeah, I think there is an issue about giving up.
Yeah.
And I think if anyone's read any work by Amy Brown, they will know it's quite a big thing for women, especially if that's what they've planned and they haven't had that support to kind of continue feeding. And I think, do you know, we only have 1 minute to go. So I think I have to just say a huge, huge thank you first to the audience for coming along and asking some very good questions, some of them tricky and some of them easier to answer than others. And thank you so much to Sharon and Caroline, who've been fantastic and given us a flavour. And I know on this project there is masses and masses more data. So I shall promise that we're going to twist Sharon and Caroline's arms to come again Maybe after June would be a good time, because they're going to be busy, I'm sure, writing up reports and things, because there's always great big reports when there's projects going. And so we will invite them later on, because there's a lot about this project that's really exciting and that we can take as midwives. So thank you so much for your time and your expertise. It's been fantastic. Now be aware that this session will go out. If you've registered, you'll get a little video link to it all, and that'll be available by the end of the week or next week. Don't forget, we've got next week's maternity and midwifery, and we've got a kind of career direction presentation, and we've got Terry Coates, who's the clinical advisor to Call the Midwife, and she's obviously a midwife and very interesting to listen to. We've also, don't forget, we've got the London Maternity and Midwifery Festival on the 1st of March. So if you haven't registered for that, please do so. We've got fantastic speakers, and it can be live, and there'll be some recorded sessions as well. And it just behoves me to say a big thank you to everyone, to our lovely speakers, and to you all. In the meantime, stay safe and stay well, and we'll see you this time next week. Take care.
One of the benefits, I think, of a platform like this is that if you are busy clinically, or if you can't watch or listen or engage real time, you can do this at other times. So that is fabulous for such a time as this. So delighted to be with you all, albeit virtually on the screen. My name is Jacqueline Dunkley-Bent. I'm the Chief Midwifery Officer for the NHS in England.
So this is what's called a hybrid event. There are people in the room, there are people watching in groups around the country, and there are people still watching in their pajamas at home. Good morning, Sue, how are you?
Good morning, I'm fine, Neil, thank you very much. It's fantastic to be here.
My argument is that the solution is health optimization. Prevention is far better than cure.
And I think there is a real risk that services that are lost or reduced during the time of COVID are not restored.
And I hope that you can take valuable insights from today. And if you're listening tonight, or if you're listening next week or next month, take valuable insights from the speakers from today and share the word, share the positive messages with your colleagues, because in these dark times, in these challenging times, everybody needs a green shoot and a pearl of wisdom. Thank you very much, and we are in this together. We stand united together.
The Maternity and Midwifery Forum brings you Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. All your CPD and revalidation needs met in one place. Our expertly curated box sets are the perfect way to engage with the latest thinking, issue by issue. They make revalidation easy and are the perfect accompaniment to any project or university coursework. In addition to video from expert speakers across maternity and midwifery, there is easily accessible research and links to the latest government policy documents. Our reflective questions at the end are the perfect primer for your revalidation. In the same way the Maternity and Midwifery Forum provides certificates to show that you have attended these festivals, We can provide certificates for those who have consumed the content of a box set and submitted their written answers to the reflective questions provided by our curator, Dr. Jenny Hall. Midwives, maternity professionals and students, do not miss out. Subscribe to Matflix today. Box sets are just £17.50 each, or access to them all starts at £8.99 per month, and only £5.99 for maternity and midwifery festival attendees. Students pay just £2.99 per month, and only £2.49 for student maternity and midwifery festival attendees. Check out the box sets at www.matflix.co.uk.